Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some malicious compliance stories and our first story of the day is by Hooked on Phone S*X. Steal my bed, lose your stuff. My uni had a dorm for foreign exchange students. It was intended for short-term residency and lacked many of the amenities of other dorms. The dorm was divided into pods, each with 4 or so rooms attached to a common kitchen and bathroom. It was 4+ people to a room. No privacy, no locks, no real rules. You were assigned to a pod, but they didn't bother assigning beds, so you just took one and worked it out amongst yourselves. But rent was cheap, 150 euros or so local students also took advantage. Quarters were tight, but people more or less got along. However, there was one girl who was just the definition of entitled. She would buy enough groceries for a family of 4, stuff the communal fridges full of her food, and freak out at anyone who dared move her things and throw out her rotten food. She would shamelessly take someone else's laundry out of running machines, put her stuff in the machine instead, and leave the other person's wet laundry in a heap on the floor or wherever. To make matters worse, she apparently felt entitled to the best room or bed or whatever, and would routinely move to another student's bunk, dumping their stuff in the hall. Why this behavior was permitted to continue is beyond me, but whatever, it was uni. Each pod had a resident advisor, essentially a student mentor responsible for ordering repairs and babysitting. The RA got their own room with a locking door. Our RA graduated at the end of my 3rd year and vacated her room over the summer. Entitled Jerk immediately moved in. Unfortunately for me, I was assigned as the new RA. I got the news less than a week before the end of my summer session. I told Entitled Jerk to move out, the resident manager told her to move out, other people warned her. Her response? Don't any of you dare touch my freaking stuff. She decided to go for a long weekend with some friends to get away from the hostile environment. Thing is, my classes were over and I was going home to my parents for the rest of the summer. My parents lived about 10 hours away by train, and I wasn't about to drag my stuff home when I had a perfectly good locking room. I texted Entitled Jerk one last time, asked her what she wanted me to do with her things. Don't you dare, my stuff stays. Okay, well that seems reasonable to me. So I got a couple of boxes from the resident manager. Gently packed up her things, stowed them under my bed, moved my stuff in, and locked up. I got a furious message a few days later demanding to know if I had locked her room. Reminded her that this was my room. She demanded to know where her things were. Well, you told me to leave them, so I did. Told her that she was welcome to pay for a train ticket for me to come back, unlock my room, let her collect her things, and get the freak out. She declined, told me that if I wanted to come back, I'd need to pay for my own ticket. Well, given that I did not want to come back, I passed on her offer and stayed gone for the next 4 weeks. She had to wrap up her studies with 4 days worth of clothes. Her computer was locked in my room, and as far as I know, she didn't even have a blanket and pillow. Never saw her again. Her parents got her stuff when I returned. So, in your guys' opinions, do you think what OP did here was over the line and they should have just boxed the stuff up and threw it out in whatever hallway or anything like that? Or do you think OP was totally justified to keep it all locked up in that room for the 4 weeks at the end of their university semester? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by JP Cog. You need to be out of the store within 15 minutes of closing. So I used to work as a manager for a very large pizza chain that is franchised. And the franchisee at my particular store happened to be a supreme penny pincher to the point where our broom broke a year ago and they're still using it. So generally after we close, it takes us anywhere from 10 minutes to 90 minutes to get the store cleaned up and all the next day prep done, depending on how busy we've been that day. It's always busy. Now the franchisee who runs the store is not happy with how long it takes us to do all this. It costs him too much, he says, and had been complaining to me incessantly about how we all need to be done with our work and clocked out within 15 minutes of closing, something that is completely impossible 99% of the time. My record is 10 minutes for the quickest time and 2.5 hours for the longest if anyone wanted to know. One day, after hearing him complain for the umpteenth time about how we take too long and how he could easily get it all done alone far faster than my team, I decided, okay, we'll be out within 15 minutes from closing. This particular day, however, was Christmas Eve. This was one of our most chaotic days of the year due to the combination of people who want pizza for the occasion, which is a ton, and lack of staff due to most of them saying they can't work over Christmas. Us managers usually have to double our hours over Christmas to keep the place running. So, as expected, we have an absolutely chaotic day with everything running behind, all while being understaffed and swamped in orders. And then closing time comes. The franchisee has long gone home, leaving me with two of my coworkers to close up, and the store is an utter mess. Usually I get most stuff done before we even close, but there hadn't been a single opportunity that day. So the floor is littered with food and rubbish, and the stack of dishes to do is 4 people high. Literally 4 piles a person high each. So I tell my coworkers to sweep and mop the floor while I blitz through all the cash counting and end-of-day paperwork, and we get all that done in about 10 minutes. Now we're standing there with the pile of dishes and all the next day prep to be done, and I look at them and say, well guys, the boss wants us out within 15 minutes, so I guess we don't have time to do all this. And with that, we leave. So the next day, which is of course Christmas, we are closed and can't work, but the boss decided to go in that morning and check everything was done correctly. I of course get a message from him wanting to know why nothing is done, and I just give him my professional reply, I made sure we were out of there within 15 minutes just like you wanted. I found out a couple days later from a coworker that he had spent his entire Christmas day there doing all the cleaning and prep work on his own to get the store ready for Boxing Day, something me and my team could have done in a couple hours. All because he wanted us out of the store quickly at night to save money. He never complained about how long we took again. I feel like if there's one thing you don't want to skimp out on, it's that final cleanup crew of the day, because if you're not a 24/7 establishment, you're most definitely gonna want everything to be orderly when you come in the morning to make it easy on everybody. You can't really feel too bad for a franchisee that constantly put down their employees saying, "You guys are taking way too long, I could do this alone in 15 minutes. Merry Christmas. Our next story is by Tom Marvolo Tomato. Change your child's fair ribbon? Are you sure? Back in the late 1980s, I was invited to help judge the vegetable contest in a neighboring county for their 4-H fair. Nowadays, we judge the garden entries by interviewing the child, discovering what things they learned working in their garden, and giving them bonus points for nice-looking vegetables. Back then, the job was not quite as simple. Each crop had different score sheets, and different points were awarded for different attributes. Were the tomatoes ripe? Were the beets trimmed? Were they all uniformly sized? Etc. Each scorecard totaled to about 50 points. If a card totaled 45 or more points, they got a blue ribbon. If the card totaled 35 to 45, they got a red ribbon. 25 to 35 was a white ribbon, and below that, they got a tiny green participation ribbon. Not only did we not get to interview the kids back then, but in fact, nobody was supposed to be in the building with us while we judged. This is important. Anyway, I got started. I was looking at green snap beans first. There had to be 20 on each plate. The beans had to be uniform, all straight or all curved. Their stems had to be trimmed to less than 1/2 inch. Lots and lots of rules. And I had maybe 40 or 50 plates of beans to look at. I'm working along, minding my own business. I did notice several people walking through the building, fair officials most likely. Most of them ignored me, and so I returned the favor. But one woman, we'll call her Brumhilda, stopped and watched me work for a while. She asked me what the points meant, and I, being a good educator, explained that each attribute was rated 1 to 10, and that this plate got an 8 for uniform shape, a 6 for stem trimming, a 9 for cleanliness, and so on. She seemed okay with my explanation and left. Next, I'm working on sweet peppers. Again, I had 40 or 50 plates to examine and was now rating them for uniform size, uniform shape, uniform color, same number of bumps on the bottom, etc. Brumhilda stops by again and watches me for a bit. She then points to a plate I had already finished and asked why it got only 40 points. Being a good educator, I explained the points I gave for that plate. 7 for not quite uniform size, 4 for different colors, greens and partial reds, etc. She humphed and left. I move on to other veggies, scoring and grading as I go. And every so often, Brumhilda would come back and question what I was doing and why I was scoring what I was scoring. I tried to remain polite and explain what I was doing, but I was beginning to notice she was asking about specific plates. All of the names and personal identification were hidden from the judges, so I didn't know whose plate was whose, but apparently she did. I was beginning to get a little annoyed with her constant questions, and became more annoyed when she suggested I was being too tough on my judging. "That cucumber's trimmed just fine, why are you picking on that poor kid?" At one point, I mentioned that I was supposed to be in the room by myself and that I shouldn't be talking with anyone, and I didn't want her to get in trouble for disrupting a judge. See, I can be tactful. Brumhilda sniffed at me. "Don't worry about me, I'm the wife of the fair board secretary," or something. "Nobody will dare to say anything to me." Fine, I continue on with my judging. After a long while, I was doing my last crop, tomatoes. I was nearly done when Brumhilda swooped in again, this time with a young boy in tow. The kid was looking around, picking his nose, and altogether didn't seem to care about anything being judged. Brumhilda looked over the plates and then screeched at me. "Why did that plate get a red ribbon? What is wrong with those tomatoes? Those are excellent looking tomatoes to me." Now, don't get me wrong, these were perfectly fine tomatoes, if I was going to slice them up and eat them. But compared to the other tomato entries, they weren't quite up to snuff. Certainly not what anyone would call a blue ribbon tomato. She continued screeching at me about how unfair I was being, and I finally had enough. "Let me understand. You don't think these are red ribbon tomatoes?" "No," she snarled. "You want me to change the ribbon?" "Of course I do," she said smugly. "Fine, I will." And I did. I took off the red second place ribbon and put on a green "thank you for showing up and participating" ribbon. Then I turned to her son. "Young man, 4-H is meant to be an educational association, and you are supposed to learn something. I hope you learn to leave your mother home next year." And with that, I gathered up my scorecards and walked out. As I was leaving the garden crops building, I looked back. The boy was still looking around aimlessly, not caring about anything going on. But Brumhilda looked like a catfish someone had hooked and left on the side of the creek, her mouth opening and closing and her throat puffing up like she was gasping for water. I don't think anyone in her entire entitled life had ever talked back to her before. I turned my scorecards in, collected my judge's fee, and never heard a word from anyone at that county fair about taking Brumhilda down a peg or 3. That's definitely a bold strategy to go right up to the judge and say, "That's definitely better than what you judged it, you need to give it a better score." And then of course they slipped up their wording and OP was able to easily use that to just totally downgrade their score. It sucks for the kid, but rules are rules. Don't try and needlessly cheat for your kid, let your kid earn it. And our final story of the day is by Detroiter1017, Safety Precautions. So many years ago, I was in charge of a maintenance department for a major automotive manufacturer. There had been several instances of people getting injured, no fatalities thankfully, and unfortunately maintenance crew members were the highest of risk when the chiefs were assessing who is priority for trialing some new strategic prevention methods. So long story short, I had to make sure that my team always wore the following: long sleeves/gauntlets, eye protection, foot protection, ear protection, head cover/bump cap, and if entering a station or cell, then Kevlar gloves must be worn. So as you can imagine, It was quite cumbersome and did result in increased repair times when machines stopped or broke down. Nevertheless, people were safer to some extent. Well, this quickly became 100% mandatory, and I had to literally write people up for any minor infringement. Very little discretion, and I did fall out with a few guys. One guy, who I had to address several times, ended up being put on final warning and decided to become overly compliant. After reprimanding multiple times to wear PPE at all times, the guy went into the safety cupboard and ensured he wore everything that was possible. I mean, the guy was covered in asbestos removal equipment, breathing apparatus, full-on exoskeleton aids, the works. He made sure each shift he wore this continuously, even through break times. Give him some credit, he was compliant. However, his repair times were terrible and I/my supervisors could not take any action as he was just being safe. I still laugh to this day as he kept it up for around 7 months and then left the company. I feel like the kind of thing sends a definite message, but after a while I feel like it would definitely wear off, the novelty of it would be gone, so I'm surprised that they kept it up for 7 months, wearing all this extra needless stuff. Yes, PPE is very important, but obviously they don't need all of that stuff. I guess in the end, it was just their way of protesting the rules all the way until their end at the company. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So, which of these stories was your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing and turn notifications on if you haven't so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Any little thing that you do helps the channel grow so much more. Whether it's commenting, subscribing, or just watching the video, thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time right here on the Storytime channel.